Good morning. So today we're continuing industrial organizational. I'm actually going to start with a bit of astrology today. So again, it doesn't matter if you know astrology, the concepts. The reason I like the astrology wheel, and it's going to be because Thursday, I'm going to introduce to you my model of leadership. So there's a big push these days for service leadership, which is sort of the employees at the top and the shareholders or the stakeholders at the bottom. And we'll talk about that a bit. But I created my own model of leadership where it's a win-win, similar to service leadership, but it's in a wheel. And I'm going to teach you on Thursday those 12 qualities. But I want to set it up with the astrology wheel first. So let me kind of go through that, and then I'll go through the law and the mythology, because there's a lot today. So the astrology wheel has 12 sections. And again, if you know astrology, great. If you don't, if you know astrology, you can look at your chart. And if you don't, I can run it for you. The main houses that we look at for work, for money, are the second houses, the sixth houses, and the 10th houses. These are called the earth houses. I told you before that the earth element is anything to do with the earthly world, and time, money, and resources is the currency of the earthly world, self-worth, and they're finite. There's not unlimited time, there's not unlimited money, there's not unlimited resources. And your self-worth is linked to how you manage your time, your money, and your resources, energy, okay? So a big part of why we work is to learn that. So I often talk about workaholics, or I talk about people that I went to lunch with a friend of mine the other day. She goes, oh, I clock out and then I stay a couple hours after. And she violates her own sort of philosophy of life to leave at 5 o'clock. There is a reason you're doing that. It's not because you're the best worker. It's because you're getting a need met there, validation usually. It's because maybe you have nothing to go home to and you don't want to be alone with yourself or your thoughts. So we have to see why employees, if we're doing IO site or ourselves, stay at work late or go above and beyond. It's not altruistic. We're so far from that. So the way that we look at that is our value system, which is super important. I'm going to talk more about that today. Our sixth house has to do with work. This is directly linked to stress and workplace illness, which is a big thing. Burnout, you're going to see a lot in the literature these days. And then our vocation, which is our service. It's our purpose. It's what our soul is sort of driven in this life to be and do. And these are all related. So when you hire an employee, or you as an employee, you don't just show up at the door of the employment place with a carte blanche or a tabula rasa or a blank slate. You're bringing your thoughts, your emotions, your unmet needs, your desires, your level of consciousness, your problems. That's all being drugged with you. In the astrology wheel, the first 4 houses are that. So here we have technically our body. We get our thoughts, our emotions, our value system, our beliefs, and our consciousness level. Your employer is hiring all of you, all of that piece, and we can't ignore that that is a big part of what causes problems in the workplace, or stress or burnout or increased or decreased productivity. And we're smarter if we understand the person as a whole rather than just a job description or a paycheck. That's why the first 2 lectures I was talking about how work is sacred space for you. Work is a place for you to do spiritual work, not only gain material wealth. So now from the employee perspective or the employer perspective, we have to see that we're hiring a whole person. And if you're going to do industrial organizational psychology in an employment agency or a workplace, you have to know that the person that gets to your office is dealing with all this other stuff. It's not just the job. There's this very funny video on YouTube I highly recommend. It's called It's Not About the Nail. And it's this woman talking to her husband or boyfriend, and she's got a nail sticking out of her head. And the man wants to solve the problem. Oh, it's the nail. She's like, it's not about the nail. And the same thing happens at work. It's not about the colleague next door in the cubby. It's not about the lunchroom not being big enough. It's not about the coffee not being available. It's not about the nail. It's so much more. The whole person shows up before they even get to the work. In astrology, we call these the individual houses. This doesn't change. This is given to you at the moment of conception, your mind, your quality of thoughts, your emotions, your desires, your values, your consciousness level. That does not change unless you decide to change it, which is what I'm going to talk about here. The workplace, just like relationships, marriage, sex, entrepreneurship, business relationships, are in this sector here, which is called the personal sector. And the 6th house has to do with that. So in astrology, the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th houses are called personal, and work is the biggest part. That is actually the area in our life where we put everything into practice. The 5th house is our relationships, our children, our lovers, our businesses that we own. 6th house is the work that we do, whether it's service to another person, whether it's our day-to-day chores, or whether it's a work employment place that you go. Marriage, sexual relationships, and other people's money or shared resources. This is where we actually do the most work on our spirit. So this is what work serves to do. For us to become a better version of ourselves, using, and I'm going to talk about the law of correspondence again, using everything in your work environment to actually teach you about your spiritual nature, to become a better, higher consciousness level human being so that you can indeed serve someone else. Right now, we serve nobody. Do not think that anything you're doing is of service or altruistic, because it's not. It's all to meet your unmet needs. So we can't break the individual up. We can't say that all of this doesn't impact all of this. That's why most of what I do is in this sector. So that now it's work. Before I told you about relationships, I told you about families. It's all related to here. Then once we sort of learn sort of our higher level consciousness, starting with individuation in the 5th house, then we can move into the universal sector and serve humanity, be of service. That's when you find your vocation. But the work house and the vocation house has something very much in common. I'm going to talk about that today, which is your values. 99.999% of people do not know what their value system is. Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little today. Your organization should have values. Okay, most of them have a mission and a vision, and we'll talk about that. But most places don't have real corporate values identified with that agency, with that company. So that poses a problem, because if you as an individual don't know your values, the company doesn't have maybe listed values, it's hard for you to identify that this would be a place that you have shared values with that can meet your needs, where you can learn sort of what I call the 48 to 52. So we're going to talk about the values in a moment. We're going to talk about a law called the Law of Correspondence. The Law of Correspondence, I've told you before, I live my life with this law. This is a law that says, as within, so without. If you learn that every single person, place, thing, or situation is a mirror of yourself, you can actually extract the essence of that situation. And we're going to talk about judgments, there's someone, or judgment, discernment in a moment. And why step 2 in the model is, what don't I like about this person, place, thing, or situation? That judgment is going to lead you to your values. So we're going to talk about that again. So everything is a mirror. The law of cause and effect. The law of cause and effect is also known as karma. What you reap, you sow. The reason I want to talk about this law is because this house is ruled by Virgo. And last week I talked to you a bit about Virgo. Today I'm going to go even deeper. It's not from an astrological standpoint. I'm just explaining it as a symbolic and as sort of a mindset. The sign of Virgo is actually linked to the Virgin Mary. So we have to look at that. And that's why I have purification as punishment. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk the symbolism of wheat, which used to be sort of the premier grain, and now everybody's gluten-free because everybody has a gluten allergy. I'm going to talk about the spiritual significance of that linked to work and food and purification. So the house that's a Virgo, that's the 6th house, that means work, illness, health, day to day is boring. Of all the signs in the zodiac, Virgo, which is my opposite sign, is like kind of the most doldrum, boring sign, because it's just like, oh, they're so OCD and they're so perfectionist and they're very judgmental and they're kind of negative and they're kind of blah. And that's the meaning that the sixth house in astrology is. It's kind of like a blah house. Oh, day to day. That's where everything happens. This is such an important space in our life, our work life. It seems day to day and boring, has so much information symbolically. So when you're seeing someone, or just in a regular practice setting, your client talk about work, you can extrapolate so much information about their self-worth, about their value system, about their money, about their heart, about what they're sowing, what they're reaping. It's really packed with information. So today I'm going to talk a lot more about symbolism and mythology. And then on Thursday, we're going to go actually into the leadership application. I'm also going to tell you why Jesus had 12 disciples. And we're going to talk about the mythology of that and how to use that same model to be an effective leader. So that's the law of cause and effect. What you reap, you sow. There's nothing being done to you. Everything is being shown to you. That's the beauty of that law. So I told you already about the astrology houses, the sector 5 through 8, which is those personal houses where sort of all the work is done. So I want to talk a little bit about the myth of the Virgin Mary. And I always say, if that's your religion, this is not anything against your religious beliefs. This is simply me using story as symbology to teach you a lesson. So if it doesn't go into your beliefs, or it does go into beliefs, everybody knows the story of the Virgin Mary. Forget your sort of religious attachment to that. This is just a story. We're using it to extrapolate a lesson. So Virgin Mary, Virgo, is the Virgin. It's linked to the 6th house, and it's linked to the sign of Virgo. I told you the other day that the symbol for Virgo is MP, materia prima. What this means is that there's no seeds. It is for you to plant whatever you want. This is a really prime opportunity, work, whatever you deem as work, because you get to plant that seed there. And Jesus has a parable of the seeds, that what you throw in that land, or where you throw the seed, is what will grow or not grow. So we actually do have some agency day to day and day to day and day to day in our somewhat boring Virgo activities to reap what we're going to sow. But it has to do with consistency. It has to do with stability. It has to do with daily activity around it. And nobody obviously likes that. That's boring. So what the Virgin Mary represents spiritually is the womb for your spiritual consciousness. That brings me back to last week's lecture about sacred spaces. Work is sacred because the work is the day-to-day that you're tending to, whether it's paying the bills if you're in accounts receivable, whether it's teaching a class and prepping for a lecture, or as a student. That day-to-day, how you show up, is how you're tending to your spirit. So Virgin Mary had nothing to do with a baby being born a virgin. It has to do with the area in our life, work, that hopefully turns to service later once we learn self-love, and what we're doing with that land, that sort of land that's raw for us to build what we want on it. She houses our spiritual consciousness. At work, you grow the seed of your Christ consciousness. So I don't know if you guys remember, but I told you that in your 4th house, you have mass consciousness. This is the honey that covers your diamond. Here you individuate. So now that you're an individual, you left the honey pot, you left the low consciousness of the manger of your family. You became your own person. You got a spiritual STD. You say you think you do. You know where you're headed. Then you start planting seeds for your spiritual life, for your mental health, for your physical well-being in the work. Work is the seed of your Christ consciousness. And I also told you that your 10th here is your Christ consciousness. So this is the Cancer Capricorn. When we say Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, that's what it's talking about. Leaving the mass consciousness of the moon and moving into the Christ consciousness, that's Capricorn or Saturn, which is the archetype that we're working with this month. So in Leo, I said you individuated in the 5th house. In Virgo, you begin to sort and purify. Where do I have? Sorting, discernment. Okay, we're going to talk about a myth of Cupid and Psyche, when Psyche is forced to start sorting the seeds. And that's very important, this concept of discernment. We'll talk about that. So I want to share a myth of Hippolyte. So I love to talk about Hercules. Hercules, because he represents us, the hero. Again, Father Zeus, with a mortal mother, demigod, just like us. We have a divine aspect inside our soul. We have an earthly sort of material, or mom, if you will, the earthly part of us. And so we're demigods on our way through purification, which is the lesson here and why we work to become the higher state of consciousness. So Hercules is told to go to the island of the Amazonians. And I've shared this with you before, the Amazonian myth that no men were allowed on the land. It was only women, and they would chop off their right breast, sort of the masculine energy. They would hold their baby on their left side, understanding that it's a balance of masculine and feminine energy. This is a law called the law of gender. Hercules is invited on the island to take from Hippolyte a girdle. It's a chastity girdle. You're going to see this theme in mythology over and over and over again. Sacred, chastity, virginal, purity. What did the fakirs used to do? They used to beat their bodies with chains and belts because the body was impure. The body is not impure. Yes, obviously it needs food and sex and sleep and poop. So there's a tendency to be, of course, a lower consciousness because it dies. It's the earth element that returns back to the earth. But it's what houses the divine. So you need it, and we need to treat it as such. But instead, because of our impure thoughts, because of our unprocessed emotions, because of our desires, greed, gluttony, envy, passions, whatever it is, we beat up our bodies. And today we'll talk a little bit about purification as punishment. And that's what the fakirs used to do. So you're going to see these themes. So in this myth, Hercules goes and she actually hands it to him. She hands him the chastity belt. Now there's a lot of importance in the chastity belt. It was a gift from Aphrodite. I've told you guys before, Aphrodite, Venus, ruler of the 2nd house, is erotic love and agape love. 2nd chakra love, passion, eroticism, children, money, wants, sex, desires. And agape love, which is love thy neighbor. You cannot get there balanced, okay, and be pure, so to speak, balancing both without the 3rd chakra of self-love and self-worth. So Aphrodite gifted this chastity belt, meaning agape love or 4th chakra love, to Hippolyte, the queen of the Amazonian women. And Hercules took it from her, but he didn't listen. He fought with her. He pulled it out of her hand, and she was handing it to him. She was like, here, take it. And he kills her. He kills her for no reason. He doesn't listen. Isn't that such a source of our problems, that we don't listen? This is where the law of correspondence comes in. So in a moment, we're going to talk a little bit about discernment and impure thoughts, and how what happens is you have an impure thought. You're a know-it-all, you're pretty, or that stupid girl, or I hate that guy's ugly, whatever. We all start with that. When you are in work or in an environment with another person, you immediately go to judge. Immediately. You are not present at any moment with anybody. You judge right off the bat. Then you start this train of thought trying to clean that thought. And you spend the entire conversation, oh my God, what am I going to say? Oh my God, did he? Oh my God, trying to hide your body language and your we are never present with anyone. That's what happened with Hercules. Hippolyte was like, here, take it. And he didn't listen, and he kills her. And we kill the opportunity to purify. We kill the opportunity to communicate. We kill the opportunity to learn from the other person. So one of the things I do with clients, I always have the impure thought. My impure thought is, I'm better than you. I know more. You suck. Shut up. I'm Francis. I'm God. Of course, I'm a narcissist. Of course I do that. Oh, I know it all. Then once I process the thought, because I know that's the thought I have, I know it all, obviously, I let it go. Like, oh, okay, that showed up again. You never stop your thoughts. So I'm not going to beat myself up and kill an opportunity, which is the law of correspondence, to learn from that person. So the thought enters my mind. This happened to me on Friday. I was talking to a colleague down the hall, and immediately I'm like, yeah, I know more than you. And then I let the thought go and I listen. Because the law of correspondence says, as within, so without. So I immediately become super mindful. My ears perk up and I listen intently. And I'm like, what is this person going to teach me about me? What are they going to mirror about me? If I spend all the time trying to clear that impure thought, I'll waste the moment to learn. At every moment, the universe is showing you something, is giving you guidance, is giving you messages. The thing is that we haven't been trained to listen. This morning, I leave my house and I didn't even realize, I noticed that I had less stuff than normal. I didn't even realize I left my purse, my calendar. I get a text or an email and I look at the email and the guy says, oh, I need an appointment. And I'm like, oh my God, my planner. And I turn right back around. Right there, I was open to receiving that appointment. Where's my appointment book? So if we stop and get out of our own head, out of this incessant thought, to be mindful that the other person can offer us something. And in every session, I've told you, with every client, what do I do after? I say, where did I say something that's for me? What is that applicable to me? I do that with every conversation. Every conversation. I am not ignorant enough to think that I have guidance to give anybody. I don't need myself. And that's part of what people don't do, especially therapists. They don't do their own work and they think that they're giving advice to someone. Really, you think that you don't need that advice yourself? The advice you give is the advice you need. So you're gonna have the impure thought. Your judgment is gonna enter. But the quicker you can let go of it and be present with that person, you can really maximize the law of correspondence. Then you're free to hear what the person is telling you. And that's the symbolism of this myth. He did not listen and he kills her. So second part of the myth. So he fails at the labor. I think I've told you before, in the 12 truths to the spiritual path, in my model, truth 1, which is the truth of thought, which I just said, truth of thought is never gone. You're there all the time. Remember, Abderus got trampled by the horses and Hercules had to collect the man-eating mares. Again, the man-eating mares are the thoughts. They're never collected. They're never tamed. They're always wild, running rampant in your head. That is a truth you never, ever stop working through until the day you take your last breath. The other labor that Hercules failed at was this one, which is the body. Has to do with the purification of the body. Now, the second part of the myth, he fails and he is, he's walking and he hears a scream from Hesione. And she's screaming, screaming, screaming. She's gonna be eaten by a sea monster and Hercules saves her. And this is the idea that one deed cleans out the other deed. So what do? Instead of, oh, I had that negative thought. Yeah, I'm a narcissist. I'm prideful. I'm egomaniac, whatever. And letting it go, we stay and we let it, and we're back in truth one. Go back to truth one. Don't collect up $200. You're right back at the Monopoly game, right? In truth 6, he tries to purify his mistake. What do you do in your life to purify your mistake? You go on a man cleanse if you have too much sex. You go on a drinking cleanse if you had too much to drink. You go on a diet and you drink green juice and detox for 3 days if you eat too much. The fakir. The body's the problem. I shouldn't have eaten too much. I shouldn't have had too much sex. I shouldn't have drank that much. And we try to purify our thoughts by harming the body. That's why work is the same house as illness. Because we're not using the work environment as a spiritual lesson or a sacred space, and rather we're beating ourselves up. Of course you judge your partner next door to your cubby. Of course you judge the lady in the other department. That's natural. We're not going to stop. So I link in a moment discernment to judgment with the myth of Psyche and Cupid. So what do? He doesn't listen, he fails, and he kills her. We do the same thing. We fail all the time. Oh, I shouldn't have eaten that much sugar. Oh, I shouldn't have drank too much. Oh, I shouldn't have this. Oh, I shouldn't have that. We're in a constant shoulda, woulda. Constant. So it's purification daily, and it's from our thoughts. It's not about our diet and stuff. Now, yes, the body is the vessel of the divine that you come to in your vocation. Channel your divine light. Take care of it. Eat well, exercise. So I go to this gym now twice a week, 6 o'clock in the morning, 20-minute workout. In and out, 20 minutes. That's it. I checked my box. There's different trainers. There's this one lady, she's older. I like her because she's not like rah, 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 you can do it, push to the mat. She's my age. The young guy is like, come on, Francis, you can do it. And I'm like, I don't care about what the bike says. I am here to check a box. I recognize that I still have not transmuted that I take care of my body better and I don't hate it and destroy it like I used to, but I'm so far from like really taking care of it the way that the vessel of my divine should be. I get that, you know, but I don't have an eating disorder anymore, and I don't self-hate, and I don't look at myself and gag, and I don't constantly beat myself up. So I've purified from my thoughts purifying. I no longer have to mistreat the vessel that holds my divine. And I tell her, I just come here to check a box because I wrote a book and Truth 6 says that I got to take care of my body. I know that I'm limited in there. I'm working that. But at least recognizing so that the thoughts don't force you into a self-destructive tendency. That's the beginning. Own the thought, identify you had the thought, the judgment, the negative, thought about something. Let it go and then be present for the situation to teach you what it came to teach you. So Virgo, or the 6th house, or the virgin, that myth or that theme in mythology, the symbology, is the child that you're taking care of, that you're raising, the seed that is your divine light. It's your divine spark that by taking care of the vessel, by looking at your thoughts, by purifying your thoughts, by taking care of all this, you grow into the Christ consciousness. And the opposite sign of Virgo is Pisces, which is obviously the era of Pisces. Jesus was the fisher of men. It's the world savior. Again, you're not saving anybody but yourself, okay? So Virgo is also linked to the struggle of bringing forth new ideas. So this is where I get the concept of feeding and flying. If you help a chickie out of the egg, it doesn't develop his beak, and then he can never feed himself. If you help a butterfly out of a cocoon, his wings don't develop and he can't fly. And we do this. We do this to our children. We do this to our partners. We do this to our friends. We do this to our colleagues. We castrate them. We keep them from feeding and flying. And people do this to us. It's important to have work. It's important to have something that you take pride in, that you do, even if you mess up, because that's going to develop your beak, your wings. It's supposed to be a struggle forth. That's part of the gift. Is, oh, wow, I pushed myself through. And I've told you before, this is linked to the birth story. There's a great story I share in my 7 Gates book, which is the puzzle maker. This is from Kabbalah. A puzzle maker makes a puzzle every single day. And all the kids of the neighborhood come to the window and he gives them the puzzle pieces. And they spend all their day putting together the puzzle. Well, one day the puzzle maker gives them the puzzle and it's intact. And the kids are like, what is this? He's like, it's just such a beautiful creation. That's supposed to be you. The puzzle maker is God. And the kids are like, but what fun is it? There's so much fun in the self-discovery process. There's so much fun when you learn something new, or you learn something new about yourself, or you see how you used to manipulate and now you're realizing you're going to see these ahas with your clients. It's really beautiful to participate in that. When your child discovers something, we don't want to take that away from someone else, and we surely don't want to take that away from ourselves. Virgo is that prime land for us to discover, work the day in and the day out. What am I learning about myself? What am I doing? The consistency of sticking with something gives you this end result. There's some satisfaction in that. When you get your paycheck at the end of the week, that you earned it. Yesterday, I was talking to my daughter, and she's moving this weekend. And I was talking to her about her money because there was an application fee for the rental. And I said, how many hours of work is that? Like, it's a whole day of work. Like, don't just pilfer it. Don't just waste it. Like, see, is this where you want to spend that money? It's not that we can't spend it wherever we want, but are we doing that with a value system in mind? Or are we just wasting our energy, our time, our money just because we can? There's something about the consistency of what we're doing mindfully with our time, our energy, our money. So Virgo is also the goddess of vice or virtue, and you can use it either way. This is the 0 to 100. When you've done something, let's say overdrink, what do? You abstain for a week or two, so you cleanse and you feel better. Vice, virtue. Vice, virtue, 0 to 100, 0 to 100. We're always in these swings, beating ourselves up, purifying. I have punishment as purification. When you punish yourself and you self-destruct, for you, it's like, oh, purification. It's a really sick thing that's happening in the psyche. You have vices, and you have to learn to love yourself despite those vices or those villains. And you also learn, and that's the beauty of the law of correspondence, is if you could see that everybody is there to teach you something, a client, a colleague, a friend, someone at work, anyone in the hallway that says something in a meeting, and you can interpret that as something for yourself. Again, with discernment, it's not that every single thing is everything meant for you. No, there's a discernment process. But if you can listen mindfully and pay attention, you can identify the other person is giving you messages. All of a sudden, it turns the whole dynamic. This is no longer the person at your cubby that's annoying that overplays the music. This is now somebody that has some offering to me. They're of service to me. That changes the whole dynamic of teamwork. So on Thursday, when I go through my whole teamwork model, it's something that I had to work through. One of my key values is leadership. But spiritual law dictates that there's no hierarchy in leadership. So how do I love being a leader and there's no hierarchy? I had to make it cyclical because the universe is cyclical. Hence why my value system, and you'll see, according to leadership, is a wheel. I serve you, you serve me, we all win. I'll explain the whole cookie concept on Thursday. So this is some stuff that I found from Alice Bailey. I love Alice Bailey. She's one of my favorite sort of esoteric authors. Too long has the body, the physical, as the root of all evil, when it really is our narrow minds and our hard, small hearts, causes wrong attitudes and habits. The body is just the automatic response to the inner man. I have a chapter in one of my books that's called "The Body is the Loyal Servant to the Psyche." And I've told you before, I can look at your body, where you carry weight, what you don't like about your body, your scars, and know everything that's happening here. Your body is a map of the war you have going on in your psyche. But we've been told that it's the body, purify, purify, purify. And it's here we have to purify, because it always starts with the thought. What happens? Our unprocessed thoughts, emotions, and desires, and our low-level consciousness, the individual, the first 4 parts of the chart, lead us to our relationships, our children, our marriage, our sexual relationships, our work environment, the personal sector. You bring all that in. So if you're not aware of your thoughts, where do you think they go? Where do thoughts that you don't acknowledge go? In your body. They have nowhere to go. It's already energy. Thoughts are matter. Emotions are matter. Desires are matter. You may not be able to touch them, but they're material in nature. They have to go somewhere. They go into your body, and they also go into the environment that you live, that then become your judgments. The criminal we talked about last month, the world you're living in, the judgments you have about what's happening politically, societally, culturally. That's why we have to take personal responsibility that we've created everything in the world that we live in. And it has to do with our small hearts. When we can show up in a conversation or in a meeting, using work as a sacred space and saying, oh, this person might offer something to me, all of a sudden our hearts open. You can do none of that without a personal value system. You can't. That's why most people hate their jobs. They don't know what their values are, and they don't know what their company values are. And there's a major crisis. Virgo is also called the goddess of the 2 ways, because as the Holy Mother principle, she symbolizes matter, so our body, our work, our money, but also the Christ aspect, our divine. That's why we want to work and show up as a servant leader or a servant to another person, but we can only do that when we love ourselves. So unless we identify our impure thoughts, own them, love ourselves despite them, then we really can never show up for another person. So again, that's why altruism doesn't really exist. So how many of you have heard of 666 being the number of the devil? You've all heard that, right? It's nonsense. 666 has to do with the 6th house, which is Virgo. It's the physical, it's the emotional, and it's the mental. At work, or purification, or with service, or with illness, or with health, or the day-to-day, whatever words you want to put to that house, it's all about the physical, it's all about the emotional, and it's all about the mental. That's the spiritual TED Talk. What don't I like about this person, place, thing, or situation? Mother, father, what need does it fulfill? When you're constantly having that conversation with yourself about something that shows up using the law of correspondence, you tackle your physical issues, you tackle your emotional issues, and you tackle your mental issues. That's what this house provides as an opportunity for us. If we really apply these lessons and use our work like those 30 years that I told you today, a sacred space, we grow. Then when we're done, then we go into the universal sector, we find our vocation, we can be of service, we can be the servant to humanity, which is now the calling for the age of Aquarius. But if you pilfer those years, you waste those years, then what do you have to offer? That's where those people that I told you they are bitter, lonely, cold, which is when they don't bend. And we're going to talk a little bit about conformity. So another myth, I'm just going to mention her because it's going to tie into the gluten, is the goddess Ceres. Ceres is where the word cereal comes from. And cereal's root is gluten or wheat. And wheat becomes an issue in our psyche now because of this house. It means wheat, it means mother, it means the womb or the Christ consciousness. Another myth I want to mention is Joseph, king of Egypt. Joseph in the Bible was prophesied to be the king of Egypt. He was sold into slavery. He was beat by his brothers. He was put in a prison. There was no way that he was going to be the king of Egypt based on the story. When he was young, he was the favored child of his parents. And he had a dream that the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him. Sun and moon, mom and dad, and his 11 brothers and him. Okay, you're going to see this model that repeats with the 12 disciples, with the dodecatheism in Greek mythology, in my model, the 12 chocolate chips or the 12 archetypes. You're going to see this repeated over and over as the model for leadership. And he becomes the king. And it's a metaphor for you being on your throne. Then all of the archetypes, including mom and dad, they don't technically bow to you in the sense that there's hierarchy, but you're the one on the throne. You're the king of your solar system. You're the king of your life. That's why it's dethroning Olympus, dethroning mom and dad, so that you can assume your rightful place. That's what he did. At the end of the story, he becomes the king. And you know that that's where I got my fat cow, skinny cow metaphor from, because it was from a series of Saturns, of removing of veils, of hardships, of crisis that we're going to experience in our work, that he then found his vocation, which was to be the king. That's why these things are marked accordingly in spiritual adulting by the age. Age is important. We need some time under our belt to become the king of our story. The other myth that he says in that Bible is that sheets of grain, of wheat, bowed down to him. He was at the center, and his brothers, as the wheat, bowed down. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot in practice, I see a lot of people with gluten allergies. Gluten or wheat was the crop. It was like the rich person's seed. It was the crop that was for rich people. There's a little bit, and I've told you this before, that illness is a form of narcissism. I am beyond the body. I don't need my body. I can do what God does without a body. So don't punish me by having a body, but rather I'll punish myself through the body for even thinking that I'm God. So there's that conundrum going on. Gluten is directly linked to that, because gluten is the wheat that I'm better than. I have the thought I'm better than you, and it affects directly in my food. And what happens at work? They bring donuts, they bring pastries, they bring all these wheat-filled or gluten-filled snacks. And then everybody's, oh, I'm gluten-free. Oh, I'm on a diet. We hear this all day, every day in offices all around the nation. There's a lot of symbology in these wheat products and the narcissism and the fact that this crop was the best crop. The low level or the poorer people had to eat other grains and they couldn't get wheat. So we always say bread, money is bread, or mana. We've seen this symbology around money, and wealth is power. So if I can create a gluten allergy at some level, I am punishing and purifying my thought about feeling better than you, about being narcissistic. It's crazy. Really, everything's a message. It's very interesting. So we see this theme of wheat repeated. So Ceres is the goddess of cereals. And she's also sort of like the mother, again, going back to the one that serves, but you can't serve others unless you're serving self first. So in astronomy, in the Virgo constellation, there is a bright star called Spica. And Spica is the brightest star in the Virgo constellation, and it means ear of corn or bread. Again, bread, money. There's a reason we use that slang word as, oh, I got bread, I got dough. We hear that. And what do we directly link that to? Wheat. because that's most of us eat wheat bread, not, spelt or any other type. Work gives us our daily bread. It's the place we go daily. It's what gives us our money to eat bread, to eat our daily thing. It's also the place, if we use it correctly with the law of correspondence, that we can get our spiritual bread, our spiritual nourishment, not just our financial nourishment. And that's the intention of, if we can teach clients and ourselves to really use work as a sacred space. So Jesus, born in Bethlehem, and I always bring Jesus because there's so much symbology, because he was an astrologer and the Bible is a metaphysical book. Does anyone know what Bethlehem means? It means house of bread. So again, Virgo, the Virgin Mary, the workhouse, the day-to-day, sort of the carpenter. He was the carpenter's son, which is wood, which is taking raw material, right? The wood, and building something of it. That's what he's saying. Take your raw materials. Once you leave the mass consciousness, you individuate, then take your raw material and do something of it for yourself and for others, so that you could be like Jesus, the world servant. But it all starts in Virgo, which is the raw material, la materia prima, the seed of what you're going to birth in this lifetime. So that's what Bethlehem means. So I want to talk a moment about tolerance. We're a very intolerant society. We judge a lot. So tolerance, and there's a very famous astrologer called Dane Rudhyar. He says, real tolerance goes far deeper than such an attitude of live and let live. A lot of people say, oh, live and let live. Do whatever you want. You do you, boo. Right? You do you. I'll do me and we're fine. That isn't tolerance. And Dane Rudhyar said, it goes far deeper than such an attitude of live and let live. Because live and let live, he says, has self-centered indifference and smugness. A house of service is about caring for the other person. In tolerance, you care. There's compassion, there's charity, there's empathy. It's not, oh, you do whatever you want because I'm going to do what I want and really I can care less about you. That's not tolerance. And part of this big lesson is this energy of tolerance. It's something that I'm working on deeply. So purification, one of the things that I do with clients, what's the initial thought? Oh, I'm better than that person. That person's fat. That person's ugly. Oh, I hate you. Oh, why are you wearing that? Oh, you shouldn't be wearing that. Or you have too much makeup on. Oh, that's caked on. Oh my God, your perfume smells. Whatever it is, silly stuff. We're constantly judging. So I have a saying, judgments are confessions, and they're great because judgments will link to your values. And we need to know our values. People do not know their values. They're living without a value system. I have client after client tell me, Francis, I have to Google that after you tell me, because I don't even know what a value system is. There are things in your life that feel to be priorities: honesty, integrity, respect, tolerance, compassion. It could be money. It could be, a certain degree of wealth, if that's it could be your physical health or your beauty, in terms of what you look like physically. There's no judgment around it. It's whatever you identify as values that are priorities in your life. But we want to have a lot of high order level priorities. The other day, a friend of mine's like, authenticity. I said, well, we've got quite a bit of work to do, because you are surely not living an authentic life. Yeah. You know me. Yeah. She's like, authenticity. And I'm like, there's nothing authentic about you. We got to work on that. You can have your value system, but you've got to define it in measurable terms. So what happens with purification, hence the Virgin Mary, the part of our body? Remember, this is all symbolic. It does not matter your religion. You're in the Western Hemisphere. The story of Jesus and the Mother Mary is ingrained in your collective unconscious. That's why I'm breaking this down from a symbolism point of view. Doesn't matter if you know about Joseph. It doesn't matter if you know about wheat. It doesn't know if you know these things. It's the fact that they're in our collective unconscious, and they're myths and stories and symbols that dictate how we treat ourselves and how we treat other people. So what I tell clients is, in the discernment, the minute you have the thought, if you've done your bad buckets, go to the bad bucket and see where you got it from. It's usually there, right? If you're judging someone's too caked on makeup, that might be a vanity or an image value system that was in your mom's bad bucket and you judged it. Because if you put it in the bad bucket, you judge it, you don't like it. So later on, we discover we need to integrate, right? First is A, awareness, I is integrate, then we learn to do it differently when we dethrone mom and dad. And you have to become aware that vanity and image is important to you, and that's why you're judging the girl's caked on makeup. But we don't want to do that. We want to live in the high chakras. We want to live in I'm authentic, honest, and have integrity. No, you don't. You are a low-level consciousness animal with thoughts, emotions, and desires that you have not processed. So you show up as half a person. You show up as the good face, the masks. That's the problem. That's why everyone is sick. I had a few people that work in not-for-profit industry reach out for help. And I'm like, the problem is the burnout in the not-for-profits in the social justice industry, especially after the last year and a half that we've had. It's because we're trying to live in the higher chakras. You've got to balance it with your lower nature. Jesus never denied being a man. And man inherently means you have impure thoughts, emotions, and desires. The myth of the virgin and all that messed us up. We've got to get over this whole purification. So you identify that you have a narcissistic thought or a vain thought or a glutton thought or a greedy thought. And you're like, oh, okay. You acknowledge it's there. You put that from your bad bucket and you can continue. If you do not acknowledge and you try to suppress that, it goes into your body and it creates illness. I had a client the other day, had a right side hip replacement, was going to get a left side hip replacement this month. The hips are the secrets. The hips are gluttony. The hips are sexuality. It's exactly where Chiron got stabbed by Hercules accidentally. It's the whole part that holds your higher nature and your lower nature. I said, you are trying to destroy the essence of who you are. Right hip dad, left hip mom, sexuality, the moment they conceived you, and the glutton part. And the funny thing is that the hips hold escapism. And she asked me, can I escape this? That was her question. I'm like, it's amazing when you know archetypes and you listen for archetypes, how people speak through an archetype. And her body could no longer hold up the fact that she did not want to be the child of her mother and father. When you don't own the thought, emotion, and desire and give it some light, a la luz that we talked about last month, it goes into your body and gets you sick. That's your burnout. That's your illness. That's why it's in the same house. It's not that you're working 80 hours. You're working 80 hours because there's an unmet need, because you don't have a boundary, because you don't have a value system. And you're not thinking about the thoughts and you're letting them materialize in the body as illness. So that's part of what happens. Then we purify, like I said, the thought with diet, exercise, abstinence, no alcohol. It's the 0 to 100, the 0 to 100, the 0 to 100. Your workplace, just listen to people in the break room. Oh, I'm on a diet. In the morning, I go to have coffee in the break room. People bring their little food that they pack their lunch. Oh, what'd you bring? Oh, I'm on a diet this week, no carbs. Oh, I'm doing intermittent fasting this week. The break room tells you everything. It's fascinating. These are the sacrifices we make to mom and dad. So I have one of the questions I ask all my clients when they have health issues or work issues. How did your parents punish themselves? Did they go on a diet? Did they stop spending? Did they not drink? The way your parents punished themselves, they stayed all night up and paid the bills, is what you do. That is linked to the sacrifice that you give to your parents. The other question I ask all clients, how did mom, usually it's mom, but how did mom and dad take care of you when you were sick? Oh, they let me watch TV. Oh, they let me watch cartoons. Oh, I didn't have to go to school. When I was little, I got IBS for a week. I was allowed to stay home from school the whole week. It became all about me. Well, what do you think I created as a result of that attention? I had IBS for many of my adult years. So the attention you get, did they give you ginger ale and crackers like my mom? Did they let you watch TV? Did they make you chicken soup? I have a client. I've been talking to this guy for like 7 years. Every conversation. Oh, I was at the hospital. Oh, I was at the doctor. Oh, he's a total hypochondriac that he'll acknowledge. He'll say self-designated hypochondriac. And I asked him once, I said, how'd your mom take it? Oh, she would rush us to the doctor. I said, and don't you see that you rush yourself to the doctor every chance you get? Because we associate that with love. The other thing that I've understood with clients is we use our body to limit our parents' power. What happens when you get sick? Who all of a sudden gets their needs met? You, temporarily. Might just be a cookie, might just be a cracker, might just be take your temperature. You limit your parents' power when you get sick. Illness has a lot of functions in society. I'm hoping that I can impart some wisdom so that people don't go through the nonsense that I created. I'm nobody to obviously keep anyone from getting any illness. Who the hell am I? But one of the things I see a lot in practice when I bring people sort of to the brink of their bad buckets and their truth is they get sick. They'll have 12 hours of crying. The other day, someone said, I vomited. I cried so much, I vomited. I'm like, that's great. You saved yourself from getting cancer. So when we can recognize that we are in part getting sick and it serves a purpose, then if we get sick maybe more frequently with a cold, a cough, a headache, a migraine, breaking a toe or something, and understanding, oh, I just processed something through that, then I don't have to accumulate the thoughts, emotions, and desires and create a cancer. But it's the only time in childhood where you actually had some control, where you actually got your needs met. Not everybody, but most people, no matter how terrible your snow globe, maybe got, I don't know, the remote control that day, something. So we psychologically sort of store that away and say, oh, I limit my parents' power when I'm sick and I can get my needs met. So it's something that's a very interesting thing, but we don't want to obviously get sick. The body shows where you are stuck, where you are stagnant, where you feel captive, where you feel imprisoned, where you feel hostage. It's not about not drinking, not eating the cookies, not having sex, not partying. It's about purifying your thoughts, emotions, and your desires as they come up with the constant spiritual TED Talk. That way it doesn't create illness. That way you're going to make much more balanced choices as a result. What does punishment as purification mean? I'm not good enough. I'm not perfect. I should have done XYZ behavior. So when we don't act according to good, according to virginal, just like Hercules, he kills Hippolyte. It's like, oh my God, let me go save this other lady. We do that. That's maybe when you start thinking you're acting altruistically or serving another person. And it's not genuine. It's to purify the thoughts, emotions, and desires that you had about someone else. And then you go and you punish yourself and sacrifice for your mom and dad. It's a vicious cycle what we've got going on. All because, and I told you, the entire spiritual adulting model is based on your value system. And at 14 to 16, you try to leave your parents' value system. Again, it's this tiny. And you don't do it. You keep castrating and castrating and castrating yourself on that same value system. And one of the big things I do with clients, what are your top 2 values? Can't be family. What? So we're set up to fail. All of this is linked in the 6th to the 2nd house of values. And we don't know, and we don't want to know. We don't want to know that we're gluttons. We don't want to know that we're greedy. We don't want to know that we're lustful. And then we workaholic. This country prides itself on not taking vacation. In your country, that doesn't happen. People love their vacation, right? In Europe, the whole month of August, everyone's on vacation. In America, we're prideful. Oh, we have so much vacation. I actually talked to a lady that I have so much vacation time. I gave it. You're allowed to donate your vacation to another person in your office. She donated her time, and we're proud about that. Because if you have a vacation and you stop working, you actually might find something out about yourself that's distasteful. So let's keep pretending from the higher natures that I'm so giving and so service-oriented and never look at the thoughts, emotions, and desires. And we get sick. Workplace illness is a big thing. We're sick. So a theme that's been coming up for me a lot in practice is this idea of conformity. So I want to talk a little bit about conformity, obedience, and compliance. Okay, and some famous psychological studies that as students you need to watch. I will post them on the Blackboard. So ask yourself, I would rather die than conform to what? Just sit with that.
That's in my chart. I'm a rebel.
Okay. Everyone's a rebel. I was talking to someone yesterday. I'm so original. I said, no, you're really not. Every single one of us is a rebel, is original, is different, is distinct, because we all have a soul, a purpose, a directed will that's unique to just Keisha Van. No other person is Keisha Van. No one can express the divine or the chocolate chip cookie dough of the universe through Keisha Van's body, but Keisha Van. But you're normal and ordinary, like I asked you last week, what was ordinary about Jesus and what was extraordinary about Jesus? Your divine is your divine expression, but you're ordinary because you have 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth, right? You're in a body just like everybody else, and you poop and sleep and eat. And I told you that this whole category of people are being invented, just nonsense, because we're not enough. We're not enough just being human, and we're surely not enough just being divine, but only a part of the cookie dough. So we say we're rebels. We say we don't conform. I had a client yesterday, and I said, well, tell me about conformity. Tell me about rules. Tell me about, oh no, I don't want anything. I said, so you would rather die than brush your teeth, wake up at a certain time, take a shower. But you just said you're a rebel, conform to society standards. Your words. Last I checked, you shower, you brush your teeth because of society. How many people during COVID didn't shower and brush their teeth? Me and a lot of other people, because there was no society standard. You have to go to work. That was like a laughing thing about people in their sweatpants. They hadn't showered for days. So you just said that. But you do conform to society standards. We all do. But we all have this thing. I'm so unique. I'm so different. Yes, you are. I remember when I was severely in my depression, one of my friends was like, Francis, you're just normal. I was like, shut up. Don't call me normal. Oh, dare you. Now, oh my God, I love just being normal. How lovely that I can be normal the way only Francis Yahia can be normal. Only my way. That keeps me from destroying my body. That keeps me from creating chaos, because chaos and rebel are the same archetype. So we will go to such extremes to not conform and not be obedient and not bend. And you know, if you don't bend, you break, right? To be so rebellious and chaotic that we'll destroy our lives to not conform. And this client that I was talking to, she's overweight and she's not obviously the happiest person at this moment, hence why she's working with me, and has done all of the things to not conform, AKA mom, because mom was the rule, because you always have one of those type of parents, and will self-destruct to own I'm a rebel, to own I don't conform, to own that I'm never going to do what anyone says. Well, but that's what people do, and you're going to see this in practice. I see it a lot. So conformity, the idea of conformity kills you. So just ask yourself, what I would rather die than conform to what? Now go to your bad buckets, go to your judgments, and go to your values. I bet you're going to find mom and dad right there. It's obedience you maybe dislike, maybe not conformity. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Conformity involves a request, someone requesting you do something, going along with people of equal status, and relies on the need to be socially accepted. Obedience, something you're told to do, involves an order, is usually from somebody of a higher rank, and it relies on social power. Compliance is changing your behavior at the request of another person, and we've all tried that, and where has it gotten us? You want to be different. So we have to see with ourselves, in the workplace, in our lives, where we try so hard to not comply, to not be obedient, to not conform ever or always, because they're at 100. So I was talking to a colleague yesterday, and he's like, I grew up in a communist country, and I don't conform to anything. I'm a rebel. I'm a rebel. I'm just listening. And we were talking about some things at work, and he's like, I do whatever I want. I tell them yes, 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 and I do whatever I want. Is that conforming? Is it rebel? What mind game are we doing? Are we being, that's clearly covert power, right? I'm going to manipulate to get what I want. The exact sort of extreme agenda or regime that he flew. So we have to kind of question our power dynamic, our status, our power currency, as I call it. And there are times that you have to be overt power, and there are times that you have to be covert power. I have a tendency to be extremely overpower, and I have to tame that. And I recognize that I have to bend, I have to be more supple, I have to be more yes inclined. And I want to be, especially because I want to be a leader defined by me, which I'll share on Thursday. Part of that is to bend like the wheat that Joseph saw. The dream is for him as much as it is a prophecy. You have to bend and bow as much as you have to stand up straight and let people bow. So we kind of have to define our power currencies. And the thing is, we had a wrong alliance with one of our parents. And most of us decided, this is something I see a lot with clients, I'll ask them, what was the first moment of shame and blame? The first moment of shame and blame in your childhood from 0 to 7, if you can remember, is usually where you learn the power currency that you're going to adopt. If it was very overt, you're like, oh, I want that. If it was very covert, you take that on. So you develop that alliance with the parent, often at your expense of your story of shame and blame. And you say, I'm going to dominate, because that's ultimately what happened, right? Your parents shamed you. They dominated you in whichever covert or overt way. And you say, I'm going to build my life on that. I want that. That's my currency. I want more of that manipulation. That gets me what I want. Or I'm going to scream and yell and be aggressive and be the squeaky wheel. That gets me what I want. So from your demise, from your pain, from your struggle, from your shame, that you then become a victim using that story, you manipulate and you create everything from that wound and that root. It's very fascinating because we saw an exchange of power and we said, ooh, that parent had the power. And that becomes our power currency. And the reality is there are times that you have to have overt power and there's time you have to have covert power. Your main power currency is going to come out at work, probably in your relationships, and you're going to eventually learn to tame that and grease that wheel, because it's a give and take. That's why we need some age that I told you a couple weeks back. So let me share some of the key sort of experiments that happen in conformity and obesity research. Ash. He says, to what extent will you go against your own convictions to fit in with the crowd? What he did was he got a whole team of his researchers pretending to be actors. They were actors. And then they got one guy to come in and they showed them all these different sizes of lines. So A, B, C, D, E, F, which is the longest line? Which is the longest line? I think it's A. B? Okay. So in the study, and I don't really think it's A, in the study, everybody in the room was like, oh, A. And it's D, obviously. And the guy in the room, the study subject, was like looking around like, oh, everybody's saying A, well, I better say A. And the study showed how we conform to social pressure. So we think that we don't, but that was a pretty, explicit experiment about that. And again, I'll post a little YouTube clips on this. Milgram, I think you've all heard of the Milgram experience. Milgram said people are surprisingly obedient to authority. Many years ago, I worked at the National Institutes of Health, and the marketing lady that would recruit the women for the study would wear a lab coat. And everybody, and Hispanics call everybody doctora. Doctora, she was a marketing person. But she knew psychology to wear the white coat. I will show up as a doctor. She never said she was. I'm the authority. And so Milgram discovered that we are very obedient to authority. What he did was he hired people like you, and I was the actor on the other side of the wall. And he said, you guys administer shocks. And you could see the machine with all the shocks. And you could see the watts, 400 watts, and I'm the actor screaming on the other. The person would look to Milgram or whoever the authority person was in the room with the white coat, and they would say, yeah, keep going, don't worry about it. You think you would stop if you're hearing me screaming on the other side. They didn't stop because the authority figure told them, yeah, keep going. That's what happened in the concentration camps. They said, oh, I was told. The authority told me. I'm not telling you, you always question authority, but you need to have your own value system. And that's what thing is here. It's about the value system. It's always about the value system. 65% of people were willing to administer the shocks at high voltage was discovered. Zimbardo, were you here when I showed the Zimbardo prison experiment video? We watched it in the other classroom. Zimbardo, he did a very famous Stanford experiment. They did a video, a movie on it. He just took random kids in the program and he assigned some of them prisoner roles and some of them warden roles or the guard roles. It was supposed to last for 2 weeks. After 6 days, they had to shut it down. The role of the prisoner, these people were beating up their friends, their colleagues, same age. They're all Stanford students. They took the role so seriously. They had them get naked, poop in in buckets, beat them. Yeah, we take our roles very, very seriously. The other day, one of my friends is like, I had a dream. Can you help me decipher it? I said, sure. So some guy in the dream brings her a bunch of headsets and all the cables are all intertwined. And she's like, I don't know what that is. And I said, those are all your roles that you're identified with. So you have to organize all of the roles and pull away. Your role as mother, your role as wife, your role as daughter, your role as teacher, your role as political activist. So you can get really clear. You are not your roles. Yes, they're what you do, but they're not what you are. That's a big part of work, what work is meant to do in developing this Christ consciousness and you finding your vocation. If you're so covered and enmeshed in those roles, you will not be able to listen to your true intuitive voice and know truly what your calling is. That so many people come. Many people readily accept the influence of an authority, even when it means causing potential harm to another person. There was a big study done on nurses, where nurses were told to do harmful things, administer medicines to patients that they knew were harm, but they were told by the doctor, even though they knew. These studies are really telling. We think. Yeah, we really have to check what we're responding to. Look, I was invited to work on this project, and I really want to work on the project. But when it boiled down to it, what I understood that the project was about didn't align with my values. And so I wrote the email to the woman, and I said, look, what you're trying to do is great. The way you're going about it is more of the same. It doesn't align with my values. What I can do for you is present it this way. I think you're going to get better results. It's going to be something new and different. It's scary to go against the grain. Now, there are people that always go against the grain. The salmon, always upstream. That's another way of the 0 to 100. It's not an always or a never. I used to be that person. Always against the grain, chaos. No, I'm normal. Thank you, Anthony, I'm normal. And normal is the 48 to 52 that lets me do Francis, the divine version of me, through this healthy earthly body without cancer, without chemo, without all the nonsense. But nope, that's not enough. We have to be so different or we have to be so the same. So we've got to find our true expression. And it's linked, I'm telling you, to your value system. And you cannot get to your value system if you don't have judgments. Judgments are confessions and they're great. So why do people obey? This is from the research. They listed legitimate authority and illegitimate authority. That there are people that have legitimate authority in your eyes and people that have illegitimate authority. So I linked it to my theory. The person that has legitimate authority is your parent that has the currency, the power currency that you bought into. The other parent, the one that you outcast, that's the one you have to integrate, you don't view as legitimate, you view as illegitimate authority. That's the one we have to integrate. You're going to find both in your workplace. I can tell you people here that I view have a legitimate authority and others that don't. Those people that I think are illegitimate authority, I have to freaking emulate. I've got to listen. I've got to watch. I've got to use them, Law of Correspondence, to teach me exactly how to bend because I have trouble bending. You got to know. It's just like the people that want to play small and hide and never speak at a meeting. Guess I speak at every meeting, obviously, right? I mean, I'm an attention whore. I have to learn to step back so that others can speak up. Those people maybe are more conforming and need to be the wheat that stands up and becomes the king, whereas I have to learn to bow. So you kind of have to check both, but I like that they said that there's two types of that authority, and I linked it to the power currency in my model. Situational obedience versus dispositional obedience. What situation you find yourself in, that's situational obedience. There are times that you have to obey based on a situation, right? We've all been there. You're not going to tell the cop, you're going to just say, yes, sir, I'm sorry, sir, to give me the ticket, sir. I mean, it's a situation. You deal with it. Others are dispositional obedience. This is where your values come in. This is linked to what type of person are you? A lot of people say, I'm such a good person, I'm such a good person. That's conventional morality. Who are you when no one is watching? That's who you are. What are your thoughts? And what do you do with your thoughts? You're gonna have those impure thoughts. You're gonna think you're better. You're gonna think you're smarter. You're gonna think the person's ugly. Fine. What do you do with your thoughts? What kind of person are you? That's more important. That's dispositional obedience. That's gonna show up as integrity and how you show up in your day-to-day life. That's what this is about. Removal of responsibility encourages obedience. I live by my mantra is take personal responsibility. This is something that I learned many years ago. I used to think it was shame and blame. Nope. I take responsibility for my failures as much as I take for my successes. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to take responsibility for our failures or our successes. We're constantly looking for some magical thinking for someone to give the credit to. The other day, this lady on HGTV, this lady on YouTube, she got a contract for HGTV show and lost 100 pounds. And she makes a video and says, oh my God, I don't know what you guys think, but I made a vision board last year, and on the vision board, and she zooms in, HGTV show, 100 pounds. Took no credit. Who do you think day in and day out went to the gym? Who do you think every day did the work, posted the video? So we're not allowed to take credit for our successes, and we surely don't want to take credit for our failures. That's what leads to obedience. Then what do? We engage in some self-destructive to say we're rebels or manipulate or passive aggressive. It's just wrong. It's all convoluted. So we have to take success and failure personal responsibility. It boils down to what is your value system, not conventional morality like Kohlberg says, that you're doing good and bad because you want a reward and a punishment. That's what punishment as purification is. When you go 0 to 100, don't eat, don't drink, go on a diet, drink juice, don't have sex, don't anything. It's nonsense. That doesn't get you anywhere. That's not based on your code of ethics, on your value system. That's all child. So my opinion, and where I really take clients, is if you don't have clear values, a rule book, or a philosophy of life, ultimately it's all the same, you cannot move in the world as an adult. Surely can't become a spiritual adult. So religion used to serve this purpose. Not so well, in my opinion, personally, but that was the function. Hammurabi's code was the first code ever written in Sumeria to keep sort of society with rules and norms. And then religion served that purpose. But we have disintegrated religion in our life. So now we're going to be the world servant. And the age of Aquarius is calling ourselves to model the behavior. We need to get really clear on our rule book, on our philosophy of life, on our values. So this brings me to the organization that you work for or your clients work for. What is their value statement? What is their mission statement? What is their vision statement? I invite clients when I do sort of corporate work, and values always, it's always part of the work I do with clients in terms of my personal practice. The top 2 values, and it can't be family, and really clearly define these, that they're visible so you have a model in which to live your life. But if you work at a place, or you could do this for your own personal thing. I had a client once do like a coat of arms with a vision statement for her family, a mission statement. The vision statement is very existential. It's very larger than life. It's kind of like your vocation. What do you want to do in the world? The other day I was having dinner with someone. She goes, I want to bring light to the world. That's like a vision statement. Your vision of what you want to do. I want to bring take off reliance of cults and gurus and religion and have people become their own teachers and spiritual gurus. That's an existential goal. That's a really big sort of goal, you know? That's what you want to sort of present in your life as your vocation. Your mission statement and the organizations is what is the organization's goal? What is the goal of your life from an earthly perspective? I told you that competition and goals and things like that are more earthly, but the spirit is more of the play, but they work together. You can never separate spirit and matter. So if you don't know what your ultimate goal is, how are you going to get there? You have to have a goal. The organization has a goal. I think the other day I read that Warby Parker glasses were like to bring affordable eyewear to everybody or something, or anyone who wants it. Affordable eyewear, that's the goal. There's something tangible, material I could see. Is there affordable glasses? Yes, that's the product that they make. What is the product that you make in life? What is the product or the service that you're offering to just your people? It doesn't have to be a global initiative. It could just be the people in your household, your children, your friends. But we don't have these conversations. And then we wonder why we're miserable. Are you working in a company that supports your goals, your missions, your values? If not, of course you're going to be sick. Edward de Bono said, effectiveness without values is a tool without a purpose. So in your job or in your life, what are you being effective in? So you have effectiveness. Well, you look a certain way. Well, what's it for? What's it effective for? What's the value that it's linked in? If your value is vanity and you're a size 2 and you've got big bosom and a gorgeous butt and a gorgeous, makeup repertoire and stunning clothes, well, then it's serving you. All of that is serving your ultimate value. But if you don't know your value, how can you be effective? How can you measure it? And we're trying to live our spiritual lives and our material lives without having these sort of conversations. He says that without values, it is a tool that has no purpose. Imagine if I have a tool and I don't even know what it's for. That's how most of us are living our life. You are a tool for humanity, for your family, for your partners, for your friend, and you don't know how to use yourself. It's sad, but this is what you're going to find. Company culture is formed on the basis of core principles. It should guide the employee and the company. And you as the employer, you as the employee, you as the IO psychologist should help the employer, the employee, and of course yourself have mutual goals. That's a conversation to have in the hiring office. What are your goals? How do they align with the company's goals? They often say, what can you bring to the table? It should go back to the values. And the question should be, how is the company going to serve me? It should be a mutual relationship, but we don't have these conversations. On Thursday, I'm going to do more of that Vesica Pisces model that I do with the overlapping circles and stuff like that. Part of what happens in your job and why there's so much job dissatisfaction is that it's not in alignment with your values. So you have to check the values of yourself, which you have to know, and the alignment of the organization with your values. So one of the things that I have clients ask, what is it about the person, the place, the thing, or the situation at work that violates your rule book, your philosophy of life? If I work at this organization and there's something severely in violation with my rules, with my values, with my philosophy of life, I cannot work here. That is self-betrayal. That is death. It is time to exit at that point. Have your exit strategy, obviously get your job or whatever. That is an appropriate question to ask. If those core values or how the leadership is running, or they're asking you to do something, I think that's how the Enron thing began. They were asking the accountants to fudge the books. I mean, that's the first question. That's the first check. If your value is integrity and honesty and authenticity, well, you should not be fudging the books. I mean, if that's not your code of ethics, and I have no judgment, if your code of ethics is to be a thief and you're fine with that, hey, stay on board. Not everybody has the same values. This is by no means a judgment. It's your job to discern what your judgments are and how they link to your value system. So this brings me to discernment and the myth of Cupid and Psyche. Cupid is Cupid, the little Valentine's little Cupid angel that we all love, right? He is the son of Aphrodite. Aphrodite is one jealous bee, okay? And Psyche is very beautiful. And Venus or Aphrodite does not like other women that are beautiful. So she gives Psyche 4 tasks. The first one is the one I'm going to share with you. She basically says, she piles on, again, you're going to see the myth, you're going to see the theme of seeds and wheat and barley and rye, things like this, okay? She says that in order for her, Cupid is her lover, to get her lover back, her son, and be happy and have her relationship back, she has to sort mountain of seeds, one by one, a pile of wheat, a pile of barley, a pile of rye. And she has to do it all before midnight. There's a lot of symbolism in that, and I'm shortening it. There's a time limit. You're only on Earth for a while. You don't have forever to do this work. You're going to die. So when I first started this class, I told you Saturn reigned for 30 years. Yes, people are working more than 30 years in productivity, but there's a timeline for this. So she was given till midnight. She was able to succeed. Discernment was putting the rye with the rye, the wheat with the wheat, the barley with the barley. That's your job. When you have impure thoughts, emotions, and desires, your job is to discern where they're coming from, put them in the bad bucket, what you're going to do with them. Are you going to link it to a value? Is that one that you're just going to let go away? Because every thought, you can't be obsessing over every thought all the time. One of the first things I do the first few weeks when I start with clients is I have them obsess about their thoughts, emotions, and desires 24/7. Shoot me a text, send me an email, leave me a voicemail. Why? Because then we find threads. You're better than everyone. Vanity or greed is a theme in your life. You're prideful, you're self-destructive, you're vain, whatever it is. So for a chunk of time, I have you self-obsess of the thoughts. Then once we discern that those are your major threads that are linked to your bad buckets, then we can work on defining the values, because you're obviously judging those thoughts and other people, and then we can link them to the values. That's the discernment process. You can't obsess 24/7 after every little thing. You won't have any time. Just like I said before, the law of correspondence helps to perk up your ears to see what someone is saying in a conversation. It can't be every single word is for you. You have to discern messages and how things come. And that's the sorting process that Psyche was given as a task. So work is an opportunity to sort. The other part of the myth is that the ants came to help her. The ants seem insignificant. We squash ants. We walk and we see ants and they annoy us, or we put herbicide to kill the ants in our kitchen. The symbolism of the ants in this myth is very important. Those people that you think can offer you nothing, okay, that serve you, that can help you. Every conversation with that colleague you don't like or that meeting you don't want to be in is information for you to learn discernment, for you, what I call to be produced. So I have a joke with my friend and my boyfriend. I'm like, yeah, I'm the talent and you guys are the puppets. I'm the puppet and you guys are the puppeteers telling me what to do. They produce me. When I'm going to shoot a video for the college or content or whatever for the website, they're the ones that are moving the strings. But in another situation, you need to be produced, and I'm the puppeteer moving the strings so that you can be. This is called the flower of life. It starts, and we're going to talk more on Thursday about the Vesica Pisces, with the original overlap of the circle. First the circle, then the overlap, which is the 48 to 52. And then here you produce, and you're the back show, and the person's the main act. Part of what we do here, yeah, I'm the main act, so to speak, teaching the class, but it's for the bigger purpose of Kaiser, the bigger purpose of the campus. So we're always getting produced and we're always producing. I was at a concert the other night and the guy was there switching the guitars, and the backstage guy brings him the guitar. And I said, you cannot have the front show without the back. We're always in this exchange. It takes an army to produce you. We're going to talk about the disciples and the dodecatheism on Thursday. Your people, your archetypes, the people in your workspace that help produce you. But there's symbolism in the ants, those things that you think are insignificant, that have nothing to offer you, are definitely the ones that help you sort and discern. Do not throw them down. So discernment is the opposite of the fool. In astrology, the fool is actually Pisces. Pisces, I always say I'm Pigpen. You guys know Pigpen? I probably just aged myself from Snoopy. Snoopy has a character named Pigpen. He has this big ball of dust all over him. Like, that's me. I have so much information constantly coming in that if I don't discern, I won't sleep. I won't be able to go. So the opposite sign of Pisces is Virgo. So everybody has a Virgo Pisces axis everywhere, and so everyone in their life, in their chart somewhere. So wherever you have that Pisces, you don't discern, and you need the Virgo or the ants or those people that provide discernment. Many years ago, my guidance, so again, my pig pen, told me create an app. So I wake up and I create an app. And it didn't work for me. It wasn't the time. I didn't have the discernment, the time, the midnight to remember, to realize that it wasn't time yet. Now is the time for me to revive that app. And oftentimes in spirituality, it's very common. Oh, my guidance told me, my guidance told you. Just because your guidance tells you something is not the time. You have to check in with your earthly world. So I have a client and he loves to shop. And I'll be like, does your earthly world support your shopping? He goes, yes. I said, then you do it. If you can be supported, I happen to have the money for the app at that moment. It wasn't a big deal, but it was wasted. If your earthly resources, time and money can support the guidance that you're getting, then fine, do it. But if not, you don't quit your job if you don't have a way to pay your bills. You don't leave your marriage you got to question these things. But in the name of spirit, in the name of spirituality, no discernment. This myth is super, super important. We have to ask, what is it offering? The opposite, or the theme, I should say, not the opposite here, is wisdom. Discernment is linked to wisdom, the time to do it. Last night I was watching Game of Thrones, and there's a scene where the king dies and his brother is, you saw it? His brother is going to be the next king. And the grandfather says, what is the most important quality a king has to have? And the kid goes, strength. And the grandfather says, no, this is why. And the kid says, intelligence. And he says, no, this is why. And then the kid goes, wisdom. And he goes, yeah. He goes, you're going to be presented with this house that has army, this house that has a navy. You don't know anything about an army. You don't know anything about a navy, but you need them to help you. You need wisdom to discern what tools you're going to use and when. You don't take a hammer to screw in a nail. I don't even know that metaphor, but you know what I'm saying. A screwdriver. You're not going to use a hammer. You need the discernment and the wisdom. And that's something we don't want to spend the time doing. And there's a reason she gave her till midnight. You are here for a certain amount of time, and you need time in order to do the work, and you need ants. You need helpers. Nobody does anything alone. When I was really getting keen on my leadership value system, which is the one I'm going to show you on Thursday, I had to get really clear on those qualities. Because as much as I love to be a leader, I need to be a team player. And I need my team to support me, and I need to support my team. So those ants are not ants. They're equals, even though you might ultimately make the choice because you're the director of your own life. You do need to outfit yourself and outsource yourself. So the paradox is do as I say, not as I do. That's what your parents tell you. And they tell you, become yourself, individuate, but don't abandon me. These are mixed messages that we get from our parents. Then we propagate this in our work life, in our friendships, with our children. We've got to look at these. 48 to 52. This is the clarity that we need. The bookends are the two power currencies, what your parents told you to do and then not to do, what they said, what they didn't say, all of that. But the 48 to 52 is you. It's a discernment of what's your value system that's important to you so that you can determine. So I mentioned a little bit, and we'll go deeper another day, that work, when it's linked to illness, and there is a lot of research around workplace illness and stress, that burnout has to do with only living in the higher chakras, not necessarily using discernment or using other people or using work as a place to meet your needs rather than you using it for sacred space and growth. So when we're in that child, we're gonna get sick. I have a few more notes, and then work sociology. I want to touch on two philosophers, and then we'll wrap up. Work sociology is defined as the goal of being productive in a way that meets human needs. That's the spiritual aspect of your work. How does it meet your needs, and how does it meet the needs for the other, the vocation? That's sort of the higher virtue of it, right? Mental or physical exertion, and it doesn't have to require the exchange of money. So there are two philosophers. One is a modern day, she's a spiritual teacher by the name of Byron Katie, and an old Armenian philosopher by the name of Gurdjieff, who I've talked to you a lot about before. He's the one that sort of resuscitated the Enneagram and the law of octaves. Gurdjieff's entire philosophical system is called the work. Byron Katie's entire system is called the work. There is a reason. Spiritual is work, just like earthly is work. It may not give you money at the end. It'll definitely give you wealth. It'll definitely give you, virtue and satisfaction and vocation. But there may not be a wealth payoff in the sense of monetary. But through your earthly work, using sacred space, setting boundaries, being clear, realizing that the team supports you and helps you discern, you will lead to this spiritual work. So Gurdjieff's main premise was a state of consciousness that we're all asleep, that we don't remember who we really are, that we are divine. And this is something we see repeated in spirituality a lot. He says that we don't have unified consciousness. One of his big theories is that multiple eyes. This has to do with the roles. Wife, mother, child, sister, teacher, classmate, friend. There isn't a unification. That's more personality and ego. I will show up to you as you need me to show up. I'll conform to what you need. But where's the soul? That's the pulling apart of the headsets. At the end of all those wires is a nice, brilliant diamond. That's your soul. Your ego and your personality are necessary as part of your material consciousness. But your soul is going to drive you to vocation. And it's through the work, the day in and day out, that's going to get you there and back to leading you to your values. If you don't know your values, you don't know where you're headed. He says that this whole goal of spirituality is self-remembering, remembering you are divine, despite, again, your earthly consciousness. Byron Katie, I love her, and this is I have a similar thing with the thoughts, but I really like hers, and I'll share it with her. And you can actually Google Byron Katie, and she's got a lot of worksheets, Judge Your Neighbor worksheets, or the work worksheets. But she says to ask yourself 4 questions. So think of a thought that you have that's negative about yourself. The first question is it true? So what's a thought you're having about yourself that's negative? I have a bad temper. Is it true? Okay, so she says it's very true. The second question, can you absolutely know that it's true? 100%. Okay, but is it 100% true? No, you never can know that something is 100% true. I'll tell clients, I have this one client, she's like, everyone gossip about me. And I said, nobody has ever in their life uttered a bad word about you? And she's like, yeah, they have. I heard. I said, no, it's you. They're just a simple reflection of self. Okay. Again, mirror, mirror, law of correspondence. So no, it's true, but you can't 100% absolutely all the time know that that's true. Okay. So right there, your thoughts are misleading. Your thoughts serve for information, and they lead you to judgments or lead you to values. But you can't believe every single thought that you have because obviously it's not true. The third question is, how do you react, Keisha, when you believe that thought about your temper? I try to get control. Purification much? Purification. Let me hold it. And what happens? The casket, is it casket or gasket? The gasket blows. Control. Of course. It's a 0 to 100. It's the law of polarity. Eventually it comes out. You gotta fart. The system's gotta get released. And the fourth question is, who would you be without that thought? Okay, you'd be calmed and controlled. So imagine if we actually went through the process, and this is her version of a TED Talk, but I'm just saying it because she calls it the work. And a lot of times you're going to see that. I always say inner work. You know, there's a reason we use that word. It's not just a work for the material, it's a work for the spiritual and the soul. We have to cultivate our consciousness. We have to cultivate the materia prima, the land of that dwells in us, our soul. We always do that to the ego and the personality. Oh, I'm just that way. Oh, I'm that way. Oh, have a temper. But if you actually stop to process the thought and think about it, like in my case, discern, where did it come from? What value? Put it in the bucket. Mother, father, it's the same thing, just her version. Who are you without the thought? And then she has a last step that's called the turnaround. What is the opposite of what you believe? She wants you to do a sentence that's the opposite of what you believe about your temper. Tell us an opposite sentence. I'm not too into the opposite because for me it's 0 to 100, but it does give you your bookends. In my case, I take you to the 48 to 52. So what would be the opposite of that statement that you believe about yourself? Okay. So you're calm and relaxed. The thing is, exactly, that's the point. It's not untrue. You're not in a rage of temper rage all the time. That's the point. That's the point. It takes you to that result. So I really like her. I want to talk briefly about the word workaholic. Okay, I see this a lot, especially in my genre and in my environment. You can be a spiritual workaholic. I am uber guilty of that. You gotta laugh and have fun. One of the interesting things about the astrology model is in the 5th house, you individuate. You find that brilliant soul that you are. In the 6th, you like pulirlo, like you polish that, right? With the day-to-day, the cultivation. In the 7th is the 7th truth. This is my 12 truths. You laugh. You'll see in the Hercules myth, the only one he laughs at is the 7th one. Because you have to laugh at yourself in the journey. You have to have fun. I used to, funny enough, I need to go back to this, end my podcast with have fun with this. I give you this lecture, this teaching, and have fun with it. I'm the last person who can have fun with any of this. I'm such a spiritual workaholic. So that shows me that I'm not in 48 to 52, that I am a glutton when it comes to these things, that I have to temper that. And I have to just balance it with more material, dancing, laughing, you know, whatever. I eat plenty. But laughing, you know, so I'm trying to do that more. I'm always playing music and I try to laugh more and just disconnect and take the laughter in the fact that I'm doing spiritual work. But it can get very heavy sometimes. So workaholic, either earthly or spiritual, is meeting your unmet needs somehow. And it's usually linked to validation needs. So what are the purification? I mean, what are the application of this for your practice? When was the first time you were told in your childhood that you couldn't? Well, what you remember. What happened? Okay, so that's one version. I don't know if I have this on the board. Maybe not. You're lazy, you're so laid back, you're not enough. Or what I hear, and I see this a lot with clients, obviously, as mirrors, is you're too much. You can't have your music that loud. You can't wear that outfit that's too loud. But that's the thing, we're both. That's the answer. But we will, lived on that 0 to 7 snow globe shatter, identify with the one that we were told. So we play small oftentimes because we're told we can't do something and we can't achieve a goal. Or like me, then you go to the other extreme, which is what I have to check, which is that you're too much, you're too this. And I'll insult myself. I'll be like, oh, I'm so much, or oh, I'm such a, and I have to check myself, this negative self-talk. So it can go in either way. Neither way is balanced. So we have to check that. So that's one of the questions I ask clients. The other one I ask, and this is very linked to the 6th house, every single person has disordered eating in some way because it's linked to toxic water theory. It's linked to the moon. Maybe you like too much chocolate. Maybe you like too much salt. Maybe you drink too much. There's some disordered food or drink habit that you have. And that is linked to this. Yes, your Starbucks. The other question I ask clients is, and I mentioned this before, what was the first time you felt shame and blame in childhood? You felt you were shamed. Were you shamed? Shame is a pretty deep one. I was shamed when I threw trash in the neighbor's pool, and I was blamed even though there were 2 other kids. And then I was given a consequence that I was going to get kicked out of the spiritual community on Mondays, which was a privilege because I was the only child allowed in. So look, I built my empire on that story. That's what I was saying earlier. So you can ask a client when's the first time they felt shame and blame, and you can link it back to how they've built their life around that power currency. The other question is, when was the first time that you got away with something? Okay, many times. So if you got away with something, that's part of your purification. If you sneak and you're coercive, if you're passive aggressive, if you're sneaky, if you get away with something, you will punish yourself as a result. So these are just sort of questions that I ask in practice, and then the story begins to unfold. So let me just check. Okay, I'm going to wrap up because we only have a couple minutes left and I don't want to start this. But on Thursday, I'm going to share with you my 12 qualities for a leader / team player, but how I use it in sort of corporate and in my own life as a leader, my chocolate chip theory. I'm going to talk to you about a saying that I have that leaders need mirrors, which is more of this law of correspondence. And I'm going to talk to you about like a king and his council and how you use the ants, so to speak, in your production, whether it's your family, your relationship, your work, your lovers, your colleagues, whatever, how you can use that metaphor. And then we're going to tie that into like dodecatheism, which was the original 12 Olympian gods, which is linked to the 12 disciples, which are linked to the 12 archetypes. So when you start seeing these themes in mythology and story, you start realizing that all these spiritual texts, all they were doing were reflecting your own psyche. It's all about the mind. So when you get control of that, everything else gets in control. That's why we cannot neglect our spiritual nature. We can't neglect our thoughts because it's creating all the other nonsense. So that's why I like to sort of synthesize various stories and where you see it a lot of times in mythology or story or in symbology, because then you start realizing, oh, well, this isn't a coincidence. There's a message here, a thread here. So that's what I, and then I'll talk to you about my, the diamond, the soul, and how you have 5 C's. So I play on the whole carrot, cut type of thing, clarity. And then the 5th is consciousness. So these are sort of the things that I bring in an IO format when I work with employees or companies or things like that. So we'll go into that on Thursday. So let me stop recording and take attendance.